She's like a sickness in my brain, a vision standing by the window pane. She ripples through the blinds and leaves me in a daze. It's in the way her body moves me, the way she grabs me and intoxicates, until the signals in my mind forget to operate. In a fragile skull, I take my pleasure from my alcohol. She'll never give you any time at all. She just comes and goes, you know. And she's got me living in a chemical love, and I try to find the strength to know when she comes back to me again. I'm gonna come up from my hiding.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another coffee and crime time. And I would apologize, but it's just going to sound redundant because this is going to be a long video, and normally coffee and crime time videos are shorter. Like I remember when I started, they were 25-30 minutes and now they're moving into 2-hour territory, but I'm sorry. I go where the case takes me. And honestly, this one took me to some places, man. Some weird places, so we have to talk about it, and it's gonna take as long as it takes. So let's just settle in, get your coffee, get a little snack, put your feet up. It's Christmas time. I know you're tired, okay, because I am. Just relax. Give me an hour or two, I don't know what's going to happen here, of your time, and just let me tell you a story, and you just listen, and let me fill your cup for once, because I know you're always filling everybody else's cup. Let me be the cup filler. I will fill the cups. Anyways, let's talk about the case. On June 1st, 1987, 16-year-old Teresa Bier accompanied a known meth addict and self-proclaimed mountain man, 43-year-old Russell Welch, into the Sierra National Forest. One person returned from this adventure, but it wasn't Teresa. And when questioned about it, Welch claimed the young girl had been lured away by Bigfoot, and then she'd been taken to, join a race of highly intelligent, sort of animalistic people who lived underground the state park and up in the mountains. Yes, I'm serious. That's what we're talking about today. Although Russell Welch would be arrested and charged with Teresa's abduction, those charges would later be dropped for some reason. And to this day, no one has any idea of what happened to Teresa Bier. Did Teresa wander away and get lost in the woods? Did she find her happily ever after with the intelligent cave people? Was she snatched up by a bored Bigfoot? Or had she been lured to an isolated area by a man with drug problems who had nefarious intentions? Let's talk about it. But first, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Scentbird. So today's video is brought to you by Scentbird, and I'm so excited because I truly do love Scentbird. I've been using it for a long time, and I find it to have so many benefits. Have you ever bought a full-sized bottle of perfume or cologne, and then you found out after a few uses that you didn't really like the scent anymore? Maybe you never did. I have at least 2 to 3 bottles of perfume that I loved how they smelled on me in the store, but when I put it on at home and then wore it all day, I realized that I didn't really like it. It didn't really represent me at all. And it can be very tricky. It's kind of like dating, right? It's very hard to find that perfect fragrance. And sometimes you want to try different fragrances at the same time to see which one fits your criteria before you commit to them. Scentbird is a fragrance subscription service that allows you to try new designer fragrances each month for just $17. The best part is you're going to get a 30-day supply of each fragrance, which they say 30 days, but for me, it can last way longer. Either way, the amount they give you is plenty, and it's plenty of time to take that scent out for a road test and figure out if it's what you want to invest in, if you want to buy a full-size bottle. For almost 2 decades of my life, I wore one perfume exclusively, Clinique Happy, and it became such a big part of who I was, I could never imagine cheating on her or leaving her for another. But then few years ago, I tried Scentbird, and a whole world of fragrance opened up to me. And I wondered, did I settle for Clinique Happy? Was I too young to know what true love actually was? Was I ever in love with Clinique Happy, or did I just love the way it made me feel? And so I told Clinique Happy, it was time for us to take a break, find ourselves, go out into the world, release the butterfly. If it comes back, it's yours. If it doesn't, it never was. And so I've really been exploring my options with Scentbird, and I've found so many new fragrances I never thought that I would like. This month from Scentbird, I received 3 completely new fragrances I'd never tried before, and I chose scents specifically that I usually would not be drawn to. Like, I looked at the notes and the scents in the fragrance, and I was like, this is not something I'd usually go for, so let me try that out. I found some really great candidates that are going to be in the running for fragrance of my dreams. So we'll start with Kensie Berry Beauty, and the cool thing is it comes in these little like travel cases, which are super easy to throw in your purse, throw in your to-go bag, throw in your carry-on for the airport. They're so small, they're so easy, and you can switch them out. So you can open the case up, here's the little fragrance inside, and like I said, look at that, it's a lot. It's a lot of perfume in there. And then you can, close it back up and start using it. The way you use these are very easy. Right now it's in a locked position, so I can't get anything out of it. That means it's not gonna be spraying all over your purse or whatever bag you put it in. You just turn it into an unlocked position and then spray. So Kensie Berry Beauty has some notes that I normally would be drawn to, the more fruity scents. Like it has strawberry, peach nectar, apple blossom, wild daisies, but it also has a sweet vanilla musk, which I didn't think I would like. However, whatever combination they put it in together in here, I love it. It's very good. It's light, it's pretty, it's feminine. It's giving me sundress in a sunflower field vibes. My second favorite is going to be this wet cherry liqueur from Bohoboco, I believe. And I did not think I was going to like this, but I did. And I remember when I first got these, I sprayed this one first because I liked how it was like kind of purpley and pretty, and I wanted to see what it smelled like. And my husband walked by a couple minutes after and he was like, "Ooh, that smells really good. I like that." And I was like, "Me too." The notes of this fragrance are cherry, licorice notes, caramel, sandalwood, and tonka bean. And it kind of just is like really kind of seductive. Like it makes me feel like I'm in my dark feminine energy. But the surprising winner of the battle of the fragrances is this one. And I'm stunned because there are other fragrances I've received from Scentbird before who have been in the top 3, and this has now moved into the top 3 and kicked a fragrance out. And it really makes me love Scentbird because I'm able to sort of hone in on which fragrances I like. So I know that I can buy full bottles of those fragrances and kind of have a rotation to go through of 1 or 2 or 3 perfumes that I love, and I know I love because I've given it a road test and I've given it enough time. So this perfume is in like a different language. I think it's French. Yeah, definitely, right? So I'm going to struggle with it, but it's Nuit Nomade, and the fragrance is called Jardins Misfah. Probably butchered that, but it doesn't matter because this is probably one of the best fragrances I've ever worn. According to the card that comes along with each fragrance, the notes here are date, rose absolute, rose essence, almond, and saffron. And when I tell you, I looked at those notes and I was like, this is the one I'm going to like the least. Like, I have no interest in any of these things. I'm stunned. This is amazing. Amazing. I can't explain it. It's so fresh. It's so clean. It gives me a memory that I cannot place my finger on, but it's so warm and like happy and youthful and like, yeah, happy. I love this. I love it. I want to be buried in it. And Scentbird has tons of designer fragrances to choose from, including Clinique Happy, right? So if she's still on the market, she's still out there looking for the one, you can snap her up. They also have perfumes, colognes, and tons of unisex options. And some of these fragrances full size can cost you over $150. Some go as high as $300, $400, $500, which is bananas to me. There are so many benefits to Scentbird. You do have to try it out to see for yourself. So make sure you click the link below to visit Scentbird's website or scan this QR code that I'm putting on the screen here, and then use my code HARLOWE55 to get 55% off your first month at Scentbird. That's only about $8 for your first month, which is a steal for, like I said, the amount you get. It's a steal. That's all I'll say, except for thank you so much to Scentbird for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. California, renowned for its diverse landscapes ranging from the iconic redwood forests to its towering mountain ranges, has long been shrouded in mystery, with one enigmatic figure at the center of countless tales. Bigfoot. The legend of Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch, has woven itself into the fabric of the state's folklore, captivating the imaginations of residents and visitors alike. This elusive creature is often described as a large, hairy, ape-like being, and it's said to roam the vast and remote wilderness of California, leaving behind a trail of tantalizing footprints and tales of eerie encounters. Reports of Bigfoot sightings in California date back hundreds of years, with witnesses recounting chilling howls echoing through the dense forests and hairy, tall figures loping through the trees. While skeptics dismiss these accounts as mere folklore or hoaxes, there are true believers out there, and they point to the consistency in the descriptions that people give when they claim they see Bigfoot, and to the sheer number of reported sightings as evidence that something unexplainable may indeed inhabit the vast California wilderness. Painted Rock is a rock shelter located on the Tule River Indian Reservation in the Sierra Nevada foothills of Central California. Various pictographs in red, black, and yellow are painted on the walls and ceilings of this rock shelter, and they're estimated to be between 500 to 1,000 years old. It is widely accepted that the Tule Indians were the people who made these pictographs, and the most unusual feature of this site is the pictographs depicting an entire Bigfoot family, a Bigfoot daddy, a Bigfoot mommy, and a Bigfoot son. But the Tule River Indian tribe called this creature Hairy Man, and apparently Hairy Man is a big part of the Tule people's culture, their folklore that's passed down through storytelling and things like that. Hairy Man is very prevalent. Now, in this picture, Hairy Man is illustrated as being a two-legged creature with long hair and large eyes, standing with its arms spread wide open. In 1973, traditional stories told by members of the reservation were collected, and the caretaker of Painted Rock, who also happened to be the daughter of a tribal elder, she said that Hairy Man was described by the Tule as being a creature who was like a great big giant with long shaggy hair standing at over 10 feet tall. California is second only to Washington State when it comes to reported Bigfoot sightings, and no matter how many times these sightings are debunked, those who believe, well, they continue to believe, and they continue to try to convince us that we should believe, and nothing will stop them from believing, trust me. Russell Welch, who was known as Skip, he was one of those people who could not be talked out of believing in the existence of Bigfoot, and he would often speak about the creature with the passion that only a true believer could exhibit, which is probably why 16-year-old Teresa Bier was so willing to follow the much older, much creepier man into the mountains, because he promised her that he'd seen Bigfoot out there plenty of times, and he would bring her to see Bigfoot as well. And Teresa was really excited about this. She was really looking forward to it. I mean, she was 16 years old, and if she would have been able to go on this mountain adventure and actually see Bigfoot in real life, this would have been the shining moment of her life. because sadly, Teresa Bier never had a good life. And from the moment she was born on April 16th, 1971, she was thrust into a world of older people, like adults in her life, who did not have her best interests at heart. Her parents, David and Shirley Bier, would have 3 daughters together, Yolanda, Vicky, and then Teresa, the youngest. They gave birth to their first daughter, Yolanda, in 1966, when Shirley was still a teenager and David was stationed in Vietnam with the military. Because Shirley was so young and apparently had no interest in being a mother at that point, or at any point, as we'll realize, Yolanda, the baby, lived with David's grandmother, Mary, until David returned to the States, at which point Yolanda went back to live with her parents. But this arrangement was short-lived, and Yolanda was soon returned to Mary's care when her father, David, said he didn't like the way his wife was treating their child. It turned out that Yolanda's mother, Shirley Bier, had some issues, and she was very abusive to all 3 of her daughters. When Teresa Ann Bier was just 3 years old, she was admitted to the hospital after her mother had taken her little baby leg and wrapped it around the slats of her crib. And then she twisted Teresa's leg until it broke. When Teresa was admitted to the hospital for this injury, the doctors discovered she also had several broken ribs from a recent beating, and social services removed her and her older sister Vicky from the home of her parents as a result. Now, Yolanda at that time was still living with Mary Bier, but Mary, she was like in her late 70s, she was advancing in age, and she just didn't have what it took at that time to raise 3 young children. So Teresa and Vicky were placed for a time in foster care, and then they were put into the custody of Sylvia Pierce, a woman that they knew from church. Now, the girls remained with Sylvia for several years, and there they experienced some consistency and peace for the first time in their young lives. But as it turns out, it would be the last time, because this peace would be interrupted when their father, David Biers, remarried and decided he wanted his daughters back. David and his wife Shirley had separated, and Shirley, who was apparently suffering from some mental health issues, she moved to Tucson, Arizona, and pretty much disappeared. Like, we didn't hear from her again after that. And then David formed a relationship with a woman named Margie Richmond, but Margie Richmond also happened to be the ex-wife of Shirley Bier's half-brother, John Richmond, making John Richmond Teresa's uncle. So Margie and David Bier, they both worked as janitors in Compton, California, and Margie had 2 daughters already with John Richmond. So David thought, whatever, we got 2 kids here already. What are 2 more? It'll be a nice blended family and it's going to work great. But it didn't, because reportedly the living situation was not ideal for Teresa and Vicky. They did not really like their new mother-in-law. There were reports that some abuse was happening in the household. Specifically, food was being withheld from the children at the hands of Margie. Like, she would lock the refrigerator and then eat food in front of them, but not give them any food. So when Teresa was a young teenager, she and Vicky went back to live with Mary Bier, who by that time was in her 80s and still had Yolanda, their oldest sister. Now, Vicky would end up running away, but as soon as Teresa arrived to Mary's house in Fresno, California, she was immediately taken to the doctor due to the extreme malnourishment that she was suffering from. And that is when John Richmond, Teresa's uncle, stepped into the picture, and he offered to take custody of the young teenager. John Richmond was well known to Fresno law enforcement as Blind Johnny, and he was described as a doper who fenced stolen property. Apparently, Blind Johnny was quite the character. He always slicked back his hair, and he always wore dark sunglasses, and he did this because he claimed he'd lost his vision. But the story of how he'd lost his vision, it varied depending on when he was telling the story and who he was talking to. One time he claimed he had shot himself in the face during a game of Russian roulette. Another time he said he had shot himself when his young and beautiful lover Rose had left him for Bing Crosby's son, of all people. But for the most part, a lot of people really kind of believed that John Richmond could actually see far better than he let on, but he pretended to be blind in order to get sympathy from people, in order to add some mystery and appeal to his life story, and also to seem less threatening than he actually was. John Richmond lived in Fresno, California with his wife, who worked as an exotic dancer. He and his wife shared 2 sons, but in addition, he also had the 2 daughters that he shared with Margie. But on top of that, the Richmond household would also see a frequent overnight visitor in the form of John's 17-year-old girlfriend, Tamara Newtown. Tamara, or Tammy, as she was called, lived with her mother, Sharon, but spent most nights with blind Johnny at his place, and Sharon claimed she hated this arrangement. She didn't approve of the relationship since, John Richmond was a much older man, and Sharon was pretty sure he was involved in selling drugs and other nefarious and illegal activities, but she said there was nothing she could do. Now, I have a question, right? I have lots of questions, but I have a question. How did blind Johnny have a wife and 2 sons who lived with him, but also have a 17-year-old girlfriend who spent the night with him often? Was this happening? Was Tammy coming over and spending the night when John's wife was, working at the club because she's an exotic dancer? Like, is that how they made it work? Or did blind Johnny's wife know that Tammy was there and they were all sharing a bed? Or maybe the wife was like, whatever, I'll sleep on the couch tonight. You guys take the bed. I don't know. Strange dynamics in this household. And it will get stranger. But because 17-year-old Tammy Newtown was often at the apartment of John Richmond, she was able to later tell the police what Teresa Bier's life was like there. Tammy said that Teresa was very quiet and withdrawn. She often stayed in her own room. According to Tammy, Teresa was a scared little girl who had somehow fallen into the custody of John Richmond, who it appears had fought so hard to get Teresa because he wanted a free babysitter for his young children. Teresa acted as a built-in round-the-clock nanny for these 2 boys to the point where she would often miss school in order to care for them. But it seemed that Teresa's life with her Uncle John was even worse because later it would be revealed that Teresa had told her great-grandmother, Mary Bier, and her sisters, Yolanda and Vicky, that John had forced her to have sex with him more than once, often. And even worse, John Richmond would let his friends come over and have sex with her. And these things were later confirmed by Tammy Newtown, who, like I said, was spending a lot of time at the Richmond residence. At the end of May 1987, Teresa Ann Bier was 16 years old and at the end of her freshman year at Central High School in Fresno. And she was pretty miserable. She was very unhappy, obviously. I mean, I just told you what she was living through. Who would be happy? And Teresa's teachers would say that Teresa had needed placement in special education classes because she was a slow learner, but I suppose that they didn't take into account all the days of school she had missed due to her uncle's exploitation of her, nor did they take into account the mental trauma and toll that this constant sexual abuse had done to Teresa, because when you have all of these very traumatic events happening, it's pretty hard to sit in class and learn algebra. So it was June 1st of 1987 when John Richmond claims he woke up and wandered into his kitchen, and that's where he found a man named Russell Shelton Welch. Welch told John, "Hey, good morning. I'm going to be taking your niece Teresa to school this morning." And apparently, John Richmond was perfectly okay with this, even though both he and Tammy, his 17-year-old girlfriend, would later tell the police that they had just met Welch the week prior, and they barely knew him. Additionally, Teresa had told her friends Peggy and Janice the previous week that she was not going to be in school that Monday because she was going camping in the mountains with an older guy she had just met. Teresa told her friends that Russell Welch, who, like I said, everyone called him Skip, he was an interesting guy, and he'd spent a lot of time in the mountains, and he'd seen Bigfoot more than once, and he was going to bring her there so that they could locate Bigfoot again and Teresa could see for herself. Now, Skip Welch, in my opinion, was not necessarily an interesting guy. He was a 43-year-old meth addict who had a rumored history of bringing underage girls into the wilderness, telling them that they would see Bigfoot, and then he would give them drugs and have sex with them. Welch worked as a house painter, but he survived on disability checks, and he was an amateur mineralogist who for many years had spent countless days and nights in the Sierra Nevada searching for metals there. In 1985, Skip's 38-year-old wife, Shannon, who, by the way, was reportedly a stunning beauty whose parents were both like LA actors, like legit actors, and she was supposed to be like this just unbelievably beautiful woman where people would ask Skip, like, how did you get her? But apparently he was very in love with her, and she died from an overdose suddenly. And after this, Skip spent even more time in the mountains trying to escape from the grief of losing his wife. But while he was up there, Skip allegedly witnessed some crazy things, including multiple encounters with Bigfoot. In the early 80s, Skip had managed to secure a meeting with a man named Roger Lajeunesse. He was the chair of the anthropology department at Fresno State University. And Lajeunesse wasn't a Bigfoot believer. He was a skeptic, but he did talk about Bigfoot in his lectures sometimes. And, you know, it was just a point of conversation, and he had done his research on Bigfoot. So when Skip reached out to him and he's like, I have proof of Bigfoot and that he does exist, Professor Lajeunesse was like, okay, let's meet. So Skip shows up to this meeting with this anthropology professor, and he's like, here, I have photographic evidence of Bigfoot in the nearby Sierras. And so they went through a stack of pictures that Lajeunesse described as being an inch or two thick. But these photos were not as ironclad as Skip had described them to be. And Professor Lajeunesse said, quote, they were pictures of shadows in the lee of trees, rocks, and shrubs taken in an alpine transitional landscape, such as you'll see in the Sierra. The individual showing them claimed they were of Bigfoot. Each and every photo was the same. It was just shadow after shadow after shadow. I remember it was excruciating because each and every photograph was just a duplicate of the previous one, end quote. And basically, this professor looked through the photos, and then he had to like break the news to Skip and be like, yeah, this is not Bigfoot. These are shadows. Like, where's your Bigfoot pictures? Because I see your landscape photography, but where's the Bigfoot pictures? And Skip was like, no, how do you not see this? This is Bigfoot right here. And he's like getting very intense about it. And Professor Lajeunesse said that during their meeting, the whole time, Skip was very intense about trying to get this professor to believe his Bigfoot claims. But he didn't seem to be a person who was unstable, violent, or high on drugs. However, there was still something about Skip Welch that made Roger Lajeunesse feel as if, you know, maybe something's not right about this guy, and maybe I don't want to be with him right now, and he wanted to get out of their meeting as soon as possible and probably not set another one for the foreseeable future. However, a few days later, Skip Welch dropped a paper bag full of bones off to Roger Lajeunesse at his office with his secretary, and Skip claimed that the bones in the bag were Bigfoot bones, and this was just more proof. Now, Lajeunesse, being an anthropologist, quickly determined that these bones were not Bigfoot bones. They were from a variety of domestic animals, most likely cattle. But honestly, he felt he'd already broken the news to Skip about none of the photographs actually being Bigfoot, and he just didn't feel like rubbing salt in the wound or reaching out and making that connection again. So he just let things be, let them lie. And he says he doesn't remember where that paper bag of bones went, but he did look at them. They weren't like human bones. They were just animal bones. But then he lost the bag of bones. Probably Skip came back and took them. He was like, if you don't respect these, if you don't appreciate them, I will. So, I mean, clearly Skip Welch wasn't the most stable or trustworthy person in the world at that time, at least. I can't speak for him throughout his life, but by the time he is heavily addicted to meth and kind of lost in a fantasy world of, you know, mystical things happening in the mountains and being friends with Bigfoot and all of that, he's not a super stable or like okay person for a 16-year-old girl to be around, especially a 16-year-old girl who's been betrayed, abandoned, and hurt by every single adult person that she's ever known. So why did Teresa's Uncle John, Blind Johnny, why did Blind Johnny seem to have no issue with this strange man driving his 16-year-old niece to school? Why did he not question the reason behind such an excursion? And why, when Teresa's school called later to let John Richmond know that Teresa hadn't shown up for school that day, why did he tell the school that she was homesick when he knew very well that she wasn't? Well, later, John Richmond would claim it's because he wanted to handle things himself. And it wasn't until 9:30 p.m. that night that John would finally call the police and report Teresa missing. He claimed that he had spent the day calling around trying to locate her, and he'd started to get nervous and worried when some of the people he talked to told him stories about how weird Skip Welch actually was. At least that's what Blind Johnny told Detective Doug Stokes of the Fresno Police Department. Detective Stokes had been assigned to Teresa's case, and he very quickly realized that this was probably not your typical run-of-the-mill lost or runaway teenager. Something very odd was happening here. Through John Richmond, Stokes was led to Tammy Newtown, Richmond's 17-year-old girlfriend, and she gave the detective some insight into who Skip Welch was, saying that he was a meth addict who viewed himself as some sort of wilderness guru, especially when it came to the Sierra Nevada, a mountain range that lies mostly in the state of California and holds 3 national parks, 10 national forests, 26 wilderness areas, and 2 national monuments. It's massive, basically, right? Sierra Nevada, massive, like area of land, mountains, forests, a lot of stuff happening. Now, Skip Welch apparently spent a lot of time up in those mountains in a place he called Ghost Canyon. And according to the book, Meth, Murder, and Bigfoot by author Jay O'Connell, quote, in a steep canyon where Chiquito Creek flows down between Quartz Mountain and Madera Peak, the area's most guarded mysteries were revealed to Skip. It had been, he believed, the site of Indian burial grounds. It was a place he knew as Ghost Canyon, end quote. Ghost Canyon isn't actually a real name for a place in the Sierra Nevada. I looked it up. There is no Ghost Canyon. I guess it was just a name that either Skip gave to this area or maybe locals or people who lived kind of like in the mountain area called it that. But either way, cool ass name, creepy name. But there's going to be a reason why Skip Welch calls it Ghost Canyon and why he thinks that there's something in or around Ghost Canyon that is mystical, magical, and can be dangerous. So Detective Doug Stokes talks to Tammy Newtown, and then through Tammy, Stokes met another young girl named Michelle. Michelle had actually been to Ghost Canyon with Skip Welch the previous summer. Tammy had thought that Michelle was something of a girlfriend to Skip, like a sometime girlfriend, but when she spoke to the Fresno police, Michelle said, no, that was not true. She wasn't even friends with Skip. She was just casual friends with his daughter, Chandra Welch. When the police spoke to Michelle, she did not tell them that she had personal experience with Skip and with Ghost Canyon, but the truth would come out eventually. Detective Stokes tried to track down Skip's daughter, Chandra Welch, but he was led instead to an old roommate of Chandra's, 20-year-old Linnell Malarkey, who wasn't much help in finding Chandra because the two hadn't spoken for a while since they were no longer roommates. But Linnell did tell Detective Stokes where he could find Chandra's brother, 21-year-old Terry Welch. And she also gave some very relevant information in regards to the type of vehicle that Skip Welch could be found driving around in. Linnell claimed that not long before Teresa went missing, Skip had offered to trade her his white Pinto for her brown 1976 Monte Carlo. And Linnell was like, this is a great deal because her car, the Monte Carlo, was beat up, like in rough shape, and the Pinto seemed to be running pretty well for the most part, so Linnell had gladly accepted the trade. Detective Stokes now had this very important information of what color and type of vehicle to be on the lookout for when they were searching for Skip Welch and Theresa and Bier. And then Detective Stokes had his interview with Terry Welch, Skip Welch's son, and Terry told the police that he was, for the most part, estranged from his father because Skip was a drug addict who had lost touch with reality. But interestingly enough, both Terry and his sister Chandra had received visits from their father Skip the day before, and they both said he'd been accompanied by a young woman who matched the description of the missing Theresa Bier. Terry said that the young woman with his father had not been hurt in any way. She wasn't scared. She wasn't being held captive. She could have left at any time, but she didn't seem to want to leave since she had outwardly expressed to both Terry and Chandra that she was very much looking forward to her Bigfoot adventure in the mountains. According to Terry, it was a surprise to no one that Skip was headed into the mountains. He'd been obsessed with Bigfoot for a while now, and he had several mining claims in the Sierra Nevada that kept him busy, including one he named for his wife, Shannon, who had passed away. When Detective Stokes talked to Skip's daughter, Chandra, she confirmed what her brother had said. She had also seen her father and a young girl the day before. She said that Skip had needed to pick up his disability check and do some work on the Monte Carlo because it was acting up, and he wanted to do that before they headed out into the mountains. And while this was happening, Chandra chatted briefly with Skip's young female companion, who we know was Teresa and Bier. Chandra said that Teresa was very excited about going into the mountains with Skip, but Chandra also told Detective Stokes that she'd asked Teresa if Teresa did drugs. Teresa had responded that she did not do drugs. Stokes asked Chandra, "Why would you pose a question like this to this young girl?" And Chandra replied that it was because she was concerned, since it was something of a well-known secret that her father Skip would bring young girls into the wilderness, give them drugs, and then engage in sexual activity with them. Armed with the knowledge of what vehicle Skip Welch was most likely to be driving and where he might start looking, Detective Stokes went to the U.S. Forest Service with questions about Skip Welch. They were able to tell Stokes that Russell Welch had 4 listed mineral claims under his name, and the Madera County Sheriff's Office told Stokes that they knew Skip Welch very well. Apparently, Skip would often go into the mountains by himself for long stretches at a time, which is fine, except that he would tell his family a day on which he would be back, and then he wouldn't come back on that day. So this created a lot of missing persons reports for the sheriff's office, and all of those missing persons reports centered around basically Skip Welch being lost in the woods and in the mountains and his family being concerned. The sheriff's deputies told Detective Stokes that since they knew Skip on site, they would keep an eye out for him as well as for the brown Monte Carlo that he was supposedly driving. And they did do this because on Friday, June 5th, Skip's vehicle was spotted in the town of North Fork. This is a tiny town of just over 3,000 situated in the Sierra Nevada foothills, about 50 miles north of Fresno. North Fork, by the way, is actually where Edmund Kemper claimed his first 2 victims, his own grandparents. Let me know if you want a series on that dude, because his own, I think it was like 14, 15, maybe tops 15. He killed his grandparents in North Fork. But anyways, Skip's car, the Monte Carlo, was parked near a trailer park in North Fork. And law enforcement would later find out that Skip had been there to visit a woman he knew who lived behind that trailer park. Her name was Dorothy Davis, and she told the Madera County Sheriff's deputies that Skip had shown up out of the blue. He was upset, and she assumed that he had to be on some kind of drug because he was talking crazy, ranting and raving about some girl in the mountains who'd been taken by a satanic group. Skip claimed to Dorothy that he'd seen this happen, and he witnessed this girl being transformed into something different, something that was all white. But he hadn't seen her after this happened, and he assumed that she was still up there with them. Dorothy Davis figured that Skip had just taken too much of something, or too much of more than one something. He was delusional and talking out his ass, basically, so she ignored the things that he was saying. Plus, she was like, his story's so bizarre, there's no way there could be a grain of truth to it. For some reason, even though Skip's vehicle was spotted on Friday, deputies did not search for him in the area at that time. And they didn't even speak to Dorothy Davis until they returned the following Monday and found Skip's brown Monte Carlo gone. They also did not contact Detective Doug Stokes or anyone at the Fresno Police Department until they had talked to Dorothy the following week. Now, this next detail may seem unimportant at first, or like an unnecessary detour from our timeline, because I know we all want to know what Skip saw in the mountains. And did he really encounter Bigfoot? we all want to know. But I think it's very important. And I'm going to explain why it's important when I wrap everything up. On Tuesday, June 9th, Teresa's uncle, John Richmond, called the police claiming that he had received a threatening call from a woman that day. He said she sounded young, and she told him she was calling on behalf of Skip Welch. This woman told blind Johnny, "You better stop talking to the police. You better stop making trouble for Skip, because if you don't, you're going to get more trouble from Skip. And by the way, Skip has a gun." This is what John Richmond claimed this anonymous woman on the phone said. This woman also told blind Johnny that if he knew what was good for him, he would just tell the police that Skip had picked Teresa up from blind Johnny's house and brought her to school, where he then saw her leave with a blonde girl. Okay, remember the blonde girl thing. Okay, so the next day, June 10th, Detective Doug Stokes received a call from Skip's son, Terry Welch. And Terry said, "I know you guys have been looking for my father. Well, I found out where he is." Skip had returned from his mountain trip, and he had gone straight to his mother's place in the Sunnyside neighborhood of Fresno. Family members who were present when Skip arrived home would later report that he seemed very upset, and his car was banged up on both sides as if it had been in a game of pinball with the mountain walls. Skip entered the home. He went directly to his bedroom. He crawled under the covers of his bed, and he began shaking and kind of rolling and rocking and chanting. And apparently this behavior must have been sort of common, sort of expected, because Skip's mother was like, "Ugh, here he goes again." And then she told Skip's brother to go into the room where Skip was and make sure that Skip didn't have his gun in there with him. But when the brother entered, he claims that Skip just lost his shit, started screaming at him to leave because there were demons in the room and he wasn't safe. Now, when Skip Welch was apprehended at his mother's house by the police, it had been 10 days since he and Teresa had ventured out for their Bigfoot adventure. And Skip claimed he didn't know where Teresa Bier was. He said he had dropped her off at school on June 1st. That was the last time that he had seen her. Obviously, the police didn't believe him. Who would? So Skip was brought into the station for a longer conversation with Detective Stokes, and that was exactly what Stokes got. A long, bizarre, convoluted conversation. Stokes said that at first, Skip Welch did talk a lot, and he expected that because people on meth usually do like to chat. They're very chatty people. Yet, Stokes said that Skip always seemed to remain composed and in control unless he was talking about Bigfoot, at which time his eyes would become fixed and almost glaze over. Stokes said it was like Skip Welch was becoming a different person. Detective Stokes also made notes during the interview, and in these notes he wrote that, listen, Skip Welch was very serious about the subject of Bigfoot. He did not take it lightly at all. In these interview notes, Detective Stokes wrote, quote, "He spoke exclusively of his sightings of Bigfoot in the back country in the high Sierras. He talked on and on regarding the facts that he had literally hundreds of sightings of Bigfoot and that there was a community of Saskatchewans, as he referred to them, living in the high Sierras, numbering several hundred to thousands. He further stated that he had established a strong relationship with this community of Big Feet that lived in the Sierras and that he had not violated them and that therefore they made themselves readily available to him," end quote. So just bear with me here. Skip says these Saskatchewans, because Sasquatches, Saskatchewans, oh my goodness. There's hundreds to thousands of them living in the high Sierras, and they have their own community, their own language, their own culture, customs. They're just living the best life out there that they can. And because Skip was just kind of always around and he never messed with them, they were like, "You're cool, dude. So we're going to make ourselves available to you now." What does that mean? What does it mean when a mass populace of Bigfoot people or Big Feet, a mass populace of Big Feet, what would you call more than one Bigfoot? Saskatchewans? A mass population of Big Feet just all of a sudden were at your beck and call because they were making themselves available to you? What does it mean? Like, were they serving you? Were they inviting you over for coffee? If you needed a bill paid, would they loan you the money? Were they, well, what's happening? Like, you got your car stuck in the mud, they're helping you push it out. What are you meaning that they made themselves available to you? Readily available to him, by the way. So during this rant, Skip informed Detective Stokes that he was not pulling his leg. He wasn't joking. This was not like a joke to him. This was very serious. He was very confident in his beliefs. And in fact, he had a bunch of pictures of Bigfoot that would prove what he was saying, which we already know from Professor Lejeunesse that these were just shadows and trees, unless he had different pictures. I don't know, but the stack of pictures that he had that he showed the anthropology professor were just shadows and trees. But Skip probably thought it was part of a conspiracy theory and that Robert Lejeunesse was somehow part of this plot, this plot by the upper elite and the upper echelons in society to just suppress the knowledge of Bigfoot. So when Detective Stokes was able to bring the topic of conversation back to Teresa and Bier, Skip Welch had an explanation for what had happened to her. Well, actually, he had several explanations, several. As it goes with most of these kinds of suspects, every time Skip put forward one alibi or one version of the story, the police would counter that with facts and evidence that they'd already picked up throughout their investigation to show him how his version of that story could not have happened. And then Skip would have to modify or change his story completely in order to make it work around the established facts, or at least the facts that he was now having established for him by the police. So first things first, Skip, he didn't even call Teresa by her name. He told Detective Stokes that he called Teresa Sam because Teresa reminded him of a homeless girl named Sam that he'd seen in a movie once. Skip then claimed that on the morning of June 1st, he and Teresa had driven around for a bit after he picked her up, and she was complaining to him about how unhappy she was with her living situation. And then he brought her to school, where they were greeted by a blonde girl, and Teresa told Skip that this blonde girl was going to help keep her hidden. Now, Skip's telling this to the police. He got back from the mountains, went to his mom's house, apparently had a woman call Blind Johnny and threaten him and talk to him about, having an alibi or a new story of a blonde girl running away with Teresa. So he must have been setting something up, right? If we're to believe Blind Johnny that this call went down, then Skip was making moves to cover his tracks long before the police showed up at his door. But anyways, Teresa told Skip this blonde girl was going to take her away and help keep her hidden because of her terrible family living situation at home. Teresa wanted to get out and run away, and she never wanted to be found again. So after this, Skip said he hung out in Fresno all day. He didn't go into the mountains at all. And he also wanted the detectives to know he would never bring a young girl into the mountains because he was well versed in the dangers that lay in wait up there. The Bigfoot and whatever else. We're going to hear there's devils and ghosts and devil gods and devil ghosts and demons and intelligent cave people and all this stuff. There's lots of stuff out there that he can't bring a young girl into, even though we know he already has brought young girls up there, more than one. But okay. So Detective Stokes asked Skip, all right, you weren't in the mountains. Well, why was your car seen in North Fork if you weren't in the mountains? And then suddenly Skip remembered, yes, I did in fact go to the mountains after dropping Teresa off at school. That's right. How could I forget that? Getting older, mine's not what it used to be. But Skip Welch insisted when I was in the mountains, I was alone. And he said there were several rangers who saw him out there who could vouch for that. Skip Welch was then asked why both of his children had reported seeing him with Teresa Bier that day after she was supposedly dropped off at school. And once again, This caused Skip to change his story several more times. One story consisted of Teresa going off with some other campers. Another involved her running away with a biker gang after this gang saw her admiring their bikes and they were like, hop on, like grease lightning, like get on, Sandra D, and we'll ride into the sunset. But eventually, Welch revealed the final bizarre tale that he would tell, warning Detective Stokes that he was going to tell the truth, but the truth was bigger than life, and no one was going to believe him. From Stokes' interview notes, quote, he then continued by stating that he wanted me to know that there were super intelligent beings living in the high Sierras along with Bigfoot, and that the Bigfoot was actually the bodyguard for this super intelligent community of people. These people existed, but he'd only made 1 or 2 sightings prior to this occasion. He stated that where Bigfoot was hairy-bodied and approximately 10 to 11 feet tall, these super intelligent beings looked much more human and were of superior intelligence. He then continued by stating that the missing person, Theresa Bier, had in fact run off with one of these super intelligent beings, someone who appeared to be female with blonde hair, approximately the same age and size as Teresa. I noted that during all of these conversations, Welch looked me continually straight in the eye and made no emotional indications that would seem to indicate that he believed he was playing a joke or relaying information to me that he did not in some way believe to be true. He also then stated that these individuals would not hurt Sam. Remember, Sam's Teresa. And he stated that he knew that we would never see her again. He stated that this whole community lived underground and that they seldom came out, but that they had such a beautiful society that once Sam was in the society, she would not want to come back, especially since she was so redacted in her own home, that it was much better for her to remain with these people, end quote. Obviously, redacted is not what was actually said in the police report. Redacted means that part of the police report was blacked out to protect privacy, whatever, what have you. But in the book, Meth, Murder, and Bigfoot, the author believes that the words sexually molested or sexually abused were most likely written in that redacted area. Detective Stokes' notes continue, saying, quote, Welch mentioned several times about his mind being messed with somewhat by Bigfoot and the mind games that they were playing on him in regards to the incident. I asked him to explain. He then explained that he did in fact search for Sam all that first day that she was gone and he was unable to find her. As he was preparing to drive through the countryside as it was getting dark, he found that his car was stuck. After trying to maneuver his car out of the rut that it was stuck in, he looked back. He then states that he observed what appeared to be a man, but not really a man. I asked him to explain. He stated that this was a spirit or some type of devil that was holding his car up off the ground. He stated that he was then able to maneuver the car and get loose from this thing that was holding his car in place, and he began to drive out of the mountain area, wanting to get to the North Fork area. As he was driving along the dirt road, he stated that he was driving at an extremely high rate of speed. He then felt that there was something in the vehicle with him. Looking through his rearview mirror, he then observed what appeared to be the face of a man in the backseat of his vehicle. He became extremely upset and scared. He stated that he could feel that this was the devil in the backseat. He turned and physically began to strike this thing that was in the backseat and states that he struck through the spirit and hit his knuckles several times on a wooden speaker that was in the back seat of his vehicle. Welch then showed me his knuckles on his right hand, and I noted that the knuckles were all scraped with small nicks and scratches. He stated that these had been much worse at one time and that they had been healing for the last few days, and he had actually cut himself on the wooden speaker, and he was trying to strike through this ghost-type individual that was in his back seat. End quote. Okay, I just told you a lot. It's a lot to unpack. Skip is going to tell Detective Stokes that he finally got the best of this demon devil man thing when he evoked the name of Jesus Christ. And then, the devil thing went away. So, if the demon devil man is holding up your car and, preventing you from driving away, and that's what's, preventing you from actually getting in your car and leaving, how are you able to wrestle the car free? Because in my head, when I hear the story, I see, this huge, strong, red-skinned, muscled devil man who has supernatural powers, just like holding onto the car with one hand, or like maybe even his pinky, right? And then Skip Welch is on the other end by the hood, and he's like yanking the car, like picking it up and yanking it. And I just don't see how Skip Welch could have wrestled his car free from the hands of this demon devil man who has supernatural powers and can just appear and disappear and apparate into the backseat of your car. I just don't see how. Because like you couldn't even get him out of your car until you talked about Jesus Christ. You couldn't even get him out of the car. So how'd you get your car away from him, out of his grip, out of his demon devil man grip? How'd you do that? But anyways, isn't it interesting how he thought he could physically with his hand punch this demon devil man? But you were punching through the demon devil man because it's a demon devil man. He's not going to just appear in solid form so you can beat the crap out of him. And he was punching through and he kept hitting the speaker. And that's why his knuckles were all messed up. Wouldn't it take you only one time to punch the demon devil man and figure out that your fist went through and now you're just hurting yourself before you stopped doing that? Not if you're Skip Welch, or not if you're looking for a reason to explain why it looks like you punched somebody repeatedly with your fist, right? Just saying, allegedly. Don't come for me. Skip Welch is an innocent man by the word of the law. All right, so Skip, he evokes the name of Jesus Christ, and when he no longer had his pesky passenger, Welch drove to his friend Dorothy's place in Nork Fork, where he proceeded to have a mental breakdown that Dorothy ignored because she's like, that's just Skip being Skip. But he said he didn't give up on Teresa. Listen, no way. No way would he give up on Teresa. Not even, Sam. Sam to him, but he did not give up on Teresa, not even with the threat of another demon devil thing invading his back seat. When the sun rose the following morning, Skip got his ass back into those mountains and looked for Teresa. And surprisingly, even though there's hundreds of miles of vast wilderness and finding her would be like a needle in a haystack situation, Skip did locate Teresa. He said he saw her running through the trees with the blonde girl creature who he had seen with her the night before. Skip said he called her name, but she ignored him. Well, maybe it's because he wasn't actually calling her real name, because he didn't seem to know it. He's like, Sam, Sam. And Teresa's just running through the woods with her new best friend, her new wildling friend. And she's like, who the hell is Sam? That's not my name. I'm Teresa, bitch. Call me by my name. I'm never listening to you again. You will never call me Sam again. I'm with my people now. This is ridiculous. Maybe Teresa didn't look when he called out her name or any name, because none of this actually happened. But which do you think is more likely? Do you think it's more likely that Teresa and the blonde wildling were running through the forest and Skip was like, Teresa, you gotta come home. And she's like, there's nothing left back there for me. And then she keeps running. Or do you think that this had never happened and he never saw it and it's just absolute bullshit? What do you think's more likely? Let me know in the comments. But wait, there's more. Skip told Fresno police detectives that if they did find Teresa's body, they would find no sexual abuse that tied back to him. Detective Stokes, in his police report, wrote, quote, he then laughed, which was the first emotion that he had shown during the interview, and stated that he had had plenty of opportunities to have sex with Sam, and that she was very willing to have sex with him, but that he was not going to have sex with the young girl because that was not his nature, end quote. Holy shit. Some people have no self-awareness, man, no self-awareness. None. The police were ready to start looking for Teresa Bier, and Skip promised that he would bring them to the last place he had seen her the following day. The next morning, Skip went with Detective Stokes and some Madera County Sheriff's deputies in 2 vehicles on a 25-mile drive from the Bass Lake substation to a meadow just past Browns Creek, where Skip claimed he and Teresa had made camp on June 1st. And they had to go way out there to get this place, right? It's not easy to get there. It took hours to drive there. There was some additional hiking involved. And once they get there, they got to find a place to park their cars, and then they still have to walk a little bit. So they're looking for Teresa or any evidence of where she may have gone. They're kind of going through this meadow. And while this is happening, Skip Welch is just sitting there chatting incessantly about Bigfoot with Detective Doug Stokes, who later wrote in his notes, quote, he told me to remain still and that if I looked into certain trees that I would be able to see the Bigfoot creatures. At one point, he even pointed to the far side of the meadow across the small creek and told me that he could see Sam running up the side of the hill with the blonde-headed girl, one of the super intelligent beings, end quote. Oh my God. If I'm Detective Stokes at this point, I'm like, how did I get here? Like, am I actually having to write out a description of like a blonde girl that I know for a fact doesn't exist? Like a blonde, wildling, super intelligent cave person being? Am I doing this right now? Like, she's got blonde hair about the same size and height as Teresa. Like, and I'm legitimately putting this in police reports? This is crazy, right? That's how Detective Stokes has to be feeling right now. And then, at the edge of the meadow where there was a grove of trees, police found what looked like the remnants of a recent campsite, complete with a fire pit covered by a damp layer of pine needles and some blankets laid out as if for sleeping. In the campsite, they also found several personal items belonging to Theresa Bier. They found her purse. Inside the purse, there was a Polaroid camera. There was also a bunch of Polaroid pictures that showed Teresa herself, as well as, Skip Welch playing guitar by their campfire. Also recovered were some articles of women's clothing, including an off-white bra and a t-shirt with the words "party animal" printed on it. Now, as he looked around the campsite, that had smoke still snaking lazily from the fire pit, and as he looked at the Polaroid pictures found in Teresa's purse, Detective Stokes felt like something isn't right here. Something just doesn't add up. And so he later showed these photos, these Polaroids, to some deputies at the sheriff's office, the Madeira sheriff's office, because they were very familiar with the geography of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and they thought that the Polaroids also looked odd. Because although the backdrop of where the camp had been found and the backdrop of the pictures that had been taken at that campsite looked, very similar, there were slight differences. And what the sheriff's deputies found most interesting was in the background of the Polaroid pictures, there was a distinctive mountain peak seen in the distance that would not be seen at the meadow campsite that Skip Welch had brought them to. So Detective Doug Stokes, in an interview with author Jay O'Connell, said, quote, "He," meaning Skip, "had created a campsite to look exactly like where the pictures were. He had gone and moved the campsite and put it back together in the same configuration with the blankets and everything that would make you think, hey, if you're looking for Teresa and the campsite, this is where it was." End quote. Now, the sheriff's office deputies believed that where the pictures had actually been taken was a completely different location 20 miles away. And although Jay O'Connell, the author of Meth, Murder, and Bigfoot, he states that Detective Stokes was not able to identify the specific mountain peak that drew the attention of the sheriff deputies, O'Connell himself believes that it was Madeira Peak, which towers above the mystical area that Skip Welch knew as Ghost Canyon. So, the police got right to work on searching for Teresa. They even brought in a helicopter with infrared technology from Sacramento. And they do that for everybody now who's lost in the woods or in some heavily densely populated place that has a lot of trees and animals and things. But in the 80s, when Teresa went missing, they were bringing in the big guns. It was expensive. It was not common technology to have on a helicopter. It was advanced technology. And they brought it in to find her. Tracking dogs were also used, as well as search parties on foot and on horseback, and all of these things were sent out. And then a few weird things happened during these searches. The helicopter would end up finding no sign of Teresa, but it did find a blue shirt on the hillside above the Browns Creek campsite, which, remember, is the staged fake campsite. Now, this shirt belonged to Skip Welch, and they found a white powdery substance in the pocket. Now, for the life of me, I cannot determine whether they tested this powdery substance or not. What was it? Was it meth? Was it coke? Was it Fun Dip? What was it? They're alluding to the fact that it was drugs, but there's no details out there as to whether they tested it and confirmed that. But when he was confronted with this discovery, Skip Welch became somewhat defensive. And he was like, "What do you want from me? Yeah, it's my shirt. It doesn't mean shit. Everyone knows that I like to come out into the mountains and do meth. Okay, like, so what? You found a shirt with meth in it. So maybe it was meth and he knew it was meth. Or maybe he told on himself and he was like, I do meth and that's meth. So maybe they didn't have to test it. But, oh, by the way, Skip Welch did tell the police, listen, I need this meth for my migraine headaches that I suffer from. A very legit medical reason that you have to hide out in the mountains and completely get so tweaked out that you lose touch with reality. Okay? That's a great reason. Migraines or insanity? I'm going to take the migraines. Additionally, since the tracking dogs needed Teresa's scent to search for her, Detective Stokes had to visit Teresa's uncle, John Richmond, and he requested an article of Teresa's clothing. He says that John Richmond handed him a pair of white girl's underwear that had allegedly belonged to Teresa, but the strange thing was there was blood in the crotch area of these underwear. And it's like, what the hell's going on here? Like, here's my question, because in the book and in a lot of these news reports, they're like, well, she could have been, on her period, she could have been menstruating. Okay, possible, right? That's possible. But like, do you not have a different article of clothing, like a shirt or something that doesn't have her blood on it in her underwear? What is that? What's going on here? Like, why would you? Maybe it's better. Maybe he thought it would be better for the scent dogs, the fresh blood, because remember, these are not washed. They have to be something that Teresa wore. But it's also going to bring up questions of maybe Teresa didn't have any underwear that didn't have blood in them because of the way she was constantly being used and abused for sex by these much older men who clearly were not going to treat her gently or with kindness and love, like, somebody who you want to be intimate with. These were people you don't want to be intimate with. So yeah, that was interesting that was the article of clothing that John Richmond felt was appropriate to hand to a police officer so that they could find his niece. But moving on. On June 11th, Russell Skip Welch was charged with the misdemeanor of child stealing, as well as unlawful concealment of a minor, which was a felony. The following day, search parties returned to the Sierra Nevada mountains and continued to look for Teresa, but there would be no sign of her found. Not that day or any other day, ever again. Like, we have no idea what happened to her. She is gone. No sign without a trace, as they say. And after the second unsuccessful search day, it was announced that the searches would be scaled down, but law enforcement would be doing periodic checks of the area, which we all know what that means. It doesn't mean shit. Like, this is a wilderness area. If you're not actively looking for her, periodic checks are not going to do anything. Lieutenant Deputy Al Conway from the Madera County Sheriff's Office announced that they had to assume Teresa was still alive, and he did confirm that the police dogs had picked her scent up in the area. He also stated that police believed she had encountered foul play, and if her body was found and it was discovered to be concealed or covered in some way, they would know that someone had actively tried to hide her and hide their crime. When the media began openly discussing the disappearance of Teresa and Bier, the police started getting calls from people who were familiar with Skip Welch, and these were mainly members of Skip's own family. Skip's younger half-brother, Robin, told the police that he believed his brother was unstable, specifically citing his relentless obsession with Bigfoot. Skip's niece, Leota, told the police that comments had been made amongst herself and some other family members that the camp Skip had led the police to, the one at Browns Creek, it had been fake, and the real location Teresa had been taken to was Ghost Canyon. At that point, Leota and her family believed that Teresa Biers was no longer alive, and that her body had probably been buried and hidden somewhere in the mountains. Leota's brother, James, also spoke to the police, and he mentioned two things that law enforcement had already heard in this case already. He talked about Ghost Canyon, and he talked about a young girl named Michelle Ryan. Now remember that Detective Stokes had spoken to Michelle when Teresa was initially reported missing, and she had been helpful in connecting the police with people who knew Chandra Welch, Skip's daughter. But at that time, Michelle had not provided additional information. What the police didn't get from Michelle, they got from James, who informed them that Michelle had been to Ghost Canyon with his uncle, and apparently she had witnessed some crazy and unbelievable things out there. So it was the previous summer when Michelle was 16, the same age that Teresa was, when she went missing, Skip Welch had promised to bring Michelle camping in the mountains to see Bigfoot, but Michelle hadn't felt comfortable going alone with the much older and slightly creepy man, so she brought two of her friends, Sam and Corky. Sam and Corky, both men, were also older, in their 30s, and they didn't believe in Bigfoot, something they really let Skip Welch know the whole long drive up into the mountains. The four of them drove for hours before setting up camp at Ghost Canyon, a place that Skip told them was home to a supernatural race of people. Michelle admitted that they all consumed some meth, like willingly, but later she wondered if somehow she might have been slipped something else, like LSD, because that would be the only explanation for what happened to all of them that night. As the evening wore on and the campfire crackled happily, they sat around and told stories, shot the shit, consumed more drugs, and eventually they were all forced to listen to Skip rattle on about Bigfoot with the flames of the fire reflected in his fevered eyes. Skip said some weird shit that night. He said that the gods of the devil lived in this canyon, and he also said that the Bigfoot people worshipped women. At some point that night, Sam, one of Michelle's friends, claimed he looked over to like the forest and he saw two red eyes glowing at him from the tree line. And he got freaked out and he was like, this is Bigfoot, you know? And so he shot his gun into the woods because he was sure that they were being watched by something otherworldly and dangerous. Michelle herself, she fell asleep eventually, but she woke up with a start in the middle of the night to find something looming over her. She began to scream. She told Detective Stokes, quote, "It was like a total, almost a devil, but it didn't look like a devil. It was white. It was like 3 feet tall. Its face ugly, and it had big eyes. And I mean, it was evil, evil, evil," end quote. According to Sam and Corky, Michelle began screaming, "He's going to kill me! He's going to kill me!" And then she took off running towards the edge of a nearby cliff. Sam believes she would have thrown herself over if he hadn't chased after her and grabbed her. Detective Stokes also heard similar stories after he talked to Professor Roger Lajeunesse from Fresno State University, who informed him that Skip Welch had once given a talk to a geology class at the college from his viewpoint as being an amateur mineralogist. And during this talk, Skip encouraged the students to hike out and look at geology formations at an area that he knew as Ghost Canyon. Detective Stokes said, quote, "I remember I talked to at least one boy and two girls. They had hiked back into this place, and he, Skip, gets them way back in this remote area. He's doing his meth. They start hearing noises during the night. They're terrified. He's telling them that he saw, the eyes of Bigfoot, and he's hearing these noises, and there's this whistling through the trees, and these kids are terrified. They were up all night thinking that they were going to be attacked by Bigfoot, who they probably thought was going to be Welch, cutting them up into little pieces and eating them," end quote. But remember what Skip Welch told Michelle, Sam, and Corky around the campfire that night in the summer of 1986, that the Bigfoot people worshipped women? Well, on June 20th, Skip's nephew, James Stokes, showed up to the Fresno police station, and he was like, "Listen, I got stuff to get off my chest. I'm very upset about Teresa still being missing, and I have information, and I need to talk about it." James said that when he had been younger, he and his uncle were very close, and Skip would often take him into the mountains. James said he remembered a conversation they once had when Skip told him that the gods of the devil resided in Ghost Canyon, and they were there because it was the actual burial place of the devil. And James also remembers Skip talking about Bigfoot constantly and how the Bigfoot people worshipped women. But then during one of their trips to the mountain, James said his uncle showed him a large rock with some sort of markings on the rock, and Skip referred to these markings as sacrificial designs. James told Detective Stokes, quote, "He stated that a woman's hands needed to be tied behind her head and off to the side when she was laid across the rock on her back, and it was here that she was presented as a sacrifice to the devil gods," end quote. So James, bless his little heart, he told Detective Stokes, like, "I am starting to feel differently about the stuff my uncle told me." He's like, because before I thought the Bigfoot people worshipped women in a positive way, like praying to a saint or something. But now I'm starting to wonder if they worshipped women in a like sacrifice to the gods kind of way. That's what I'm thinking now is probably happening out in those mountains. James Welch also talked about Michelle Ryan, and he claimed that he'd been a big part of why Sam and Corky had agreed to go along with Michelle. He said he had not wanted Michelle alone with his uncle in the mountains because he knew that it was well known amongst their family and that there'd been a rumor for some time that Uncle Skip would bring young girls into the mountains and drug them and take advantage of them. On top of all of that, James said that he believed the whole campsite at the edge of the meadow was fake and his uncle could kill, sacrifice, and bury someone in one location and then lead the police to another location and then everything would be fine. Detective Stokes wrote in his notes, quote, he stated that he knew that his uncle completely believed that he would be able to walk away from the situation knowing that he would gain a lot of publicity and that at the most he would only spend a year or so in jail for child neglect or child stealing, end quote. According to Skip's nephew, James, Teresa's body could be anywhere out there, but he said he would definitely start with Ghost Canyon. He said Skip could have easily taken Teresa's body into a mine shaft or dropped it into a mine shaft or just buried it on or around land that he had mine claims on. Reportedly, law enforcement thoroughly searched both locations for Teresa Bier. And when I say both locations, I mean the location around the Browns Creek staged campsite and the location of Ghost Canyon. But they didn't search the canyon area until long after the initial searches had taken place because it did take a while for them to put two and two together that the Browns Creek campsite was a red herring. Given the fact that it took over 10 days to even begin searching for Teresa and countless more days before law enforcement realized they were probably looking in the wrong place, if Teresa's body had been left in the wilderness or buried in a shallow grave or just covered up with like pine needles or leaves to hide it, she most likely would have already been taken away by animal life. There's like bobcats, mountain lions, all sorts of stuff out in those mountain ranges. And Bigfoot, blonde-headed, highly intelligent cave people, all sorts of things could have happened. Now, I'm also not ignorant to the fact that there is a huge urban legend that many people do believe that there's a network of caves underneath our state parks, and there are a race of people living down there who come up and kidnap tourists. Like, I'm not completely ignorant to that. I'm very well aware of it. I think it's super cool, by the way, but it's not real. I don't think it's real. It's got a whole lot of like missing 411 feelings to it. But yeah, I'm aware that there is a tale that exists such as this, and I'm sure Skip Welch was aware of it as well. On August 24th, 1987, Russell Skip Welch was formally indicted and his request to be released on bail was denied. And several members of his family testified, and we don't know exactly what was said. We do know, however, that at this time, Skip's younger half-brother Robin told the media, quote, I asked him point blank, did you do it? And he said no. And I believed him. I knew how he was, inside and out. He wouldn't hurt a fly, wouldn't even litter, end quote. All right, he left his shirt on the mountainside. That's littering, right? With like meth in the pocket. So what would have happened if some cute little grizzly bear had gotten a hold of that? We have Cocaine Bear. Do you want to see Meth Bear? Because I don't. Cocaine Bear was scary enough. Meth Bear? I don't want that. I don't want that to happen. Skip actually remained in jail for a while until his trial, where he continued to call Detective Stokes for a chat every now and then. And Stokes said, quote, even after he'd got an attorney, he would call me. It was like he just wanted to keep on talking and keeping this thing alive. He was always going off on these tangents that wasn't really producing anything other than the fact that he would change a little bit of his story. The premise was, I'm going to help you solve this case because I'm going to show you that I didn't kill her. But he would end up, even when he obviously had been off his dope for days, he'd been in jail, he still had this thing when he'd be talking about Bigfoot. He got this stare in his eyes, and he almost became a different person, end quote. Eventually, Stokes stopped answering the calls of Skip Welch because he wasn't getting anything of use from Skip and he had other cases to work. And then in October, Skip Welch was scheduled to go on trial for child stealing. But then things got weird and complicated. Like, I'm still not sure I understand what happened. The official story is that the district attorney's office didn't want to get Skip for child stealing, which would carry only a sentence of up to 4 years if he was convicted. They wanted to charge him with Teresa's murder. So hoping to avoid compromising a potential murder charge, the district attorney, Elvoice Hooper, offered Skip Welch a deal. He would plead guilty to 1 count of child stealing and he would serve just 1 year in jail. But in exchange, Skip would be required to sign away his right to later claim double jeopardy if a murder case was ever brought against him. Skip's public defender urged him to take the deal. He was like, dude, it's a good deal, man. Like, you went up in the mountains with a girl, she didn't come back, and then you said Bigfoot took her. You know, like, take the freaking deal. 1 year, it's nothing. But Skip refused. He wanted to take his chances at a trial. But that would never happen either. Do you know why? Because the DA's office ended up completely dismissing all charges, stating that the case against Welch could become a homicide if they ever found Teresa's body, and then they were worried about a double jeopardy issue if they tried him on the lesser crime. So, I mean, but are you like looking for Teresa's body? No. So, okay, let's just let him go. Let's just let him go, right? Skip Welch went into the mountains with the 16-year-old girl. She never came home. He claimed that Bigfoot and the highly intelligent cave people have her. She's frolicking in the meadows, running up hillsides with her new blonde friend. He did absolutely nothing wrong, even though he's got abrasions on his knuckles, you know, because he punched a devil demon man in his backseat. He's got a history of doing things like this. He's clearly not right in the head, you know, clearly. But he walked free. Because why? No body, no crime, I guess? Like, how is anyone supposed to find one body in that vast wilderness with the elements and the wildlife ready to erase any and all signs that it was ever even there? It blows my mind. Because I think if the DA had charged Skip Welch with the murder of Teresa Bier, and if they'd brought that to a jury and let Skip's dumb ass get up on the stand and start babbling about Bigfoot and, you know, cave people, it's a lock. They're coming back guilty. Guilty, unanimously, in my opinion. But, I mean, I don't know. What do I know? I would vote guilty on that jury. All right, let's go over some theories. Some people say that maybe Teresa was actually taken by Bigfoot. I'm serious. Some people say that. They've made videos about it. We're not going to entertain that here because, come on. I know sometimes we like to have fun. I know we like to talk about things that couldn't possibly be real. But listen, this isn't a strange and unusual video. This isn't a Halloween video. This is a video about a 16-year-old girl that nobody ever gave a shit about, who vanished, and people continue to not give a shit. And I feel terrible for Teresa. She never had a chance in life. She was never given any power or agency to determine her own path. She was abused and used by every single adult in her life, probably besides her grandmother, Mary, her great-grandmother, Mary Bier. And I mean, she clearly suffered a great deal of emotional turmoil from this, and all she freaking wanted to do was see Bigfoot. That would have been something that maybe would have made all the other stuff easier if she had this magical, unique, once-in-a-lifetime experience to hold on to and go back to in her mind. She just wanted to freaking see Bigfoot. She was a 16-year-old girl. She was very childlike because when you are a young person who's still developing in your brain and you're subject to all of this sexual abuse and abuse in general, you stop growing up mentally. Like, you stay a little girl. And I think that Teresa very much stayed a little girl and she just wanted to see Bigfoot. Now, it's also speculated that Skip Welch may have tried to assault Teresa and she ran away from him and got lost, which I suppose is possible. But why wouldn't she just, like, call his name? Like, if she got lost, she wouldn't have gotten far. And I mean, at the end of the day, like, she would have preferred to go back to Skip and at least know that she had some sort of semblance of safety rather than just wander through the woods. But I suppose it's possible. Anything's possible, even Bigfoot. But remember that Skip's daughter, Chandra, she had told the police she was so concerned when she saw her father with Teresa in 1987 because of her father Skip's reputation for what he was doing with young girls in the mountains. She was so concerned about it. She talked to the police about it. But in 2017, Chandra posted a defense for her father, Skip, stating, quote, "Do you want to know what the investigators had to show in this case? Nothing. Not one single shred of evidence. Not in the case file, not in the evidence room, not anywhere, because there is none. Everything you hear is BS. The only truth to this story is that, yes, Teresa went on a Bigfoot search with my dad. Is there anything proving that he hurt her in any way? Is there evidence of her blood or DNA on him? Or was there anything that points to her deceased remains or even a stitch of evidence to show foul play? No, my dad didn't do anything except to use very stupid judgment. If he was smart enough to pull off a crime so disturbing and make a person completely disappear, don't you think he would have come up with better stories?" End quote. And to you, Chandra, I say, it looks like his story was pretty good, right? Because he's not in prison. He didn't get charged with anything. So it looks like his carefully constructed and chosen story was actually the perfect one. And it takes a smart person, I think, to, come up with something like that in their heads and then tell it to people in a way where they believe that you believe it. You know what I mean? But she is right. Chandra is right in one thing. They never did find any physical evidence that Skip Welch had killed Teresa Bier. They never found blood or DNA, and they did search his car. They found an empty jug of wine. But we also have to remember that Skip, he was out in the mountains for a minute, after Teresa went missing. He had several days to cover everything up. He had time to stage a whole ass fake campsite like 20 miles away from the original place that he was. So I'm sure he had time to burn the clothes he was wearing before getting into his car so that he didn't transfer blood and DNA all over the place, so he didn't bring anything home with him, besides a demon devil man. And it was the 80s, okay? 1987 that we're talking about right now. We're not talking about the height of forensic science here. But I think what the most important factor is that we're missing here when we talk about getting justice for Teresa and Bier is the obvious lack of family support for that justice, and as a result, a lack of pressure put on the police force. Author Jay O'Connell spoke to Teresa's older sister Yolanda many years later, and Yolanda said she felt guilty because she'd just been a kid herself when Teresa went missing. She was fighting her own battles, just trying to survive herself, but now as an adult, she regrets that there were no family members pushing the cops or giving interviews, going on television shows to get Teresa's name, face, and story out there. It seems as if everyone had gotten what they wanted from Teresa, and then when she went missing, they washed their hands of her. She was expendable. It sucks that she's gone, but I've already used her for everything I need to use her for. I'll just find a new young girl to bring into my house and watch my kids and use for my pleasure. So it seemed like she was just completely an object that could be discarded and cast away when it wasn't needed anymore. And that is most likely how Teresa was made to feel every single day for her entire life. Now, I cannot escape the feeling that there's something more to the John Richmond situation. Uncle John, Blind Johnny, they're all the same people. Uncle John, John Richmond, Blind Johnny, all the same people. There's something more to that situation because Teresa has never been found. And this is allegedly still an open investigation. So the police haven't released all the details. For instance, I would be interested to know if anyone ever checked on John Richmond's claim that he'd called around all day on June 1st looking for Teresa. Did anybody, verify the nature of the relationship between John Richmond and Skip Welch? Was Skip there to buy drugs? Was Skip one of the friends that John would allegedly allow to come over and have sex with Teresa? It seems odd that as an uncle, you would allow your niece to leave with some strange man you barely knew, you just met last week. And if you don't even want to look at it from that perspective, because you think it's clear that Blind Johnny did not regard Teresa with any familial care or love, it's still odd that he would allow his built-in babysitter to be whisked away by a strange man that he barely knew. And when Richmond found out that Teresa had not shown up for school, he lied. He lied to the school and said she was homesick, almost as if he was buying Skip Welch time, time to get out to the mountains, time to do what he had to do, time to do what, I guess would be the question. Well, that depends. Maybe John Richmond had some prior agreement with Skip. Like, you give me this, you can have my niece for the day. Do whatever you want to her. I don't care. We all do anyways. Now, in the event that something went wrong up in those mountains, John Richmond isn't going to tell the police everything. He knows, he's not going to call the police and be like, oh, I told Skip Welch that he could take Teresa and completely use and abuse her. And I think he might have killed her. He's not going to do that, because then Skip's going to turn on him and tell the truth exactly about how he and Teresa ended up together that day. And he's going to be like, well, if I did have Teresa and I was told I could have sex with her, it was by her uncle, John. And then we have a whole finger pointing, he said, she said thing, instead of this cone of silence, which I believe John Richmond was a part of. That's just my opinion. I believe John Richmond knew far more than he ever admitted to. And in an article that ran in the Fresno Bee, Richmond said something interesting about Teresa's disappearance. When he was asked what he thought had happened to her, John Richmond responded, quote, "Man, she's dead, or she's been sold into slavery. No one could be gone that long and not get in touch with their family," end quote. Sold into slavery, huh? Wow, that's one of the last case scenarios you'd want to think about. And he's just casually, dead or sold into slavery. There's no I hope she's alive, or I am sure she's okay and she'll come home to us. None of that. It's she's dead or she got sold into slavery. Now, Jay O'Connell, who remember is the author of Meth, Murder, and Bigfoot, I'm going to link O'Connell's book in the description box because there's a lot of details and stuff in there, and it's very good if you want to check it out. But Jay O'Connell writes that John Richmond's girlfriend Tammy claimed that Richmond was involved with drugs. She said he sold meth to well-connected political figures. He also served as a police informant, and allegedly he had in his possession tape-recorded conversations with the dirty cops. So is it possible that a man like this, who felt he was untouchable and who eagerly and willingly lived in the darkest, most dankest parts of society, is it possible he might be involved in something like human trafficking? Is it possible because he knows so many powerful people and has dirt and, information on these people, such as politicians, dirty cops, etc.? Is it possible that they just kind of gave up on Teresa because they were all right, if we pursue Skip Welch, he may finger Blind Johnny, and then Blind Johnny's going to come and just tell everything he knows about all of us. So let's just let things lie. She was a 16-year-old girl. No one wanted her. We don't need to work too hard on this. We should just actually let Skip Welch go. Let's just let him go free, walk free. Is it possible that happened? And like I said, is it possible that John Richmond and Skip Welch were involved in something like human trafficking? Because tons of people are, right? I mean, every day, even just in my area, there's new trafficking rings broken up. I have personal experience with this. But a prior person that I worked with is in deep in a scandal like this, where more information keeps coming out about him and how deep it goes, and how he's trading pictures of his children with other men who are into the same thing and trading pictures. It's gross. It's gross. But this happens every day, all day around us. Doesn't matter what country you're in. It doesn't matter how nice your neighborhood is or how safe you feel. There's dirty ass people on your street doing dirty ass things on their computer like this, and you had no idea. You have no idea that's happening. So I think it is possible. Teresa may have been handed off. I mean, it's California, which is a high state for trafficking. She may have been handed off in the mountains, and that's why her body will never be found. But that's sad, because then we'll never know what happened. Both John Richmond and Skip Welch have since passed away. I was going to say sadly, but then I realized it's not sadly for me. For both of these men, I hope they burn in hell, honestly. I hope they burn in hell, and that every day they're just getting loved on by a bunch of, hundreds and thousands of Bigfoot people, just being loved on by them. Do you understand what I mean when I say that I hope the Bigfoot people are loving on John Richmond and Skip Welch? Loving on them hard. You know what I mean? Finally, we do have to examine the last scenario, which I believe to be the most likely scenario, which is Skip Welch murdered Teresa after he sexually assaulted her. That being said, it's very clear that not only was Skip using way too much meth, but there was something mentally not right with him as well, and that could have been a pre-existing condition, which was exacerbated by the meth, or it could have been brought on by the meth use. As we've talked about before in many videos, meth is a dangerous drug. It is nothing to mess around with, and it can completely change who someone is as a person. It can cause them to do things that even their closest family and friends cannot comprehend. It exerts its influence on the central nervous system and leads to significant impairments in the functioning of the brain, nerves, and senses, and this can cause something called methamphetamine psychosis. According to the NIH, which is the National Institute of Health, methamphetamine psychotic symptoms and syndromes are frequently experienced among individuals who use meth, with recent estimates of up to approximately 40% of users affected. So approximately 40% of people, or 40 out of every 100 people who use meth, will experience this psychosis. And the acute symptoms can include agitation, violence, and delusions. And in a subset of people, psychosis can recur and persist, and it may be hard to distinguish between, a meth psychosis and between something like schizophrenia. Psychosis profoundly affects a person's perception of reality, blurring the line between what is real and what is not. Like Bigfoot. Individuals who experience psychosis may suffer from hallucinations where they see or hear things that are not really there, or they may hold beliefs and ideas that lack logical coherence. Most of the resources that I read about meth psychosis made sure to highlight that there was a high likelihood of violent or angry outbursts when a person is in this meth psychosis. Now, we know that if Skip Welch was anything, he was consistent. When he went to his friend's house in North Fork, he was distraught, talking crazy. He said he and Teresa were in the mountains, and then he saw Teresa turned all white by a group of weird people. When he went to his mother's house in Fresno, he ran right into his room and jumped in bed and pulled the covers over his head and screamed that there were demons everywhere. Some might say that Skip actually believed that he saw what he says he saw. And that is possible if he was using this meth, right? Because it sounds similar to what Michelle and Sam and Corky saw when they were in the mountains with Skip in 1986. Michelle said that when she woke up, she saw this figure looming over her and it was all white. Maybe when you take enough meth, that's what you're seeing. I don't really know. Or glowing red eyes or something. Maybe whatever you're hearing before or while you're taking the meth is going to influence what you see. And that's why all of them seem to share these same sort of hallucinations and delusions. So maybe because of the drugs that he was always on, Skip actually did see crazy shit and he believed what he saw. That is possible. Or it's possible that he knew everyone already thought he was the crazy Bigfoot guy. So in the aftermath of Teresa's murder, he behaved as he would be expected to behave. He knew that the police would come calling sooner or later. He was the last one seen with her. So he was cognitively with it enough to build an entire fake campsite away from where the crime had actually taken place. Would he not be aware enough to behave in the days and weeks following as if he was out of touch with reality and thought Bigfoot had actually, stolen Teresa away? The fact that there was no physical evidence of the crime that was found, at least, that makes me feel even more that Skip Welch was clear-headed, conscious, aware, and calculated enough to make sure of it. He knew that as long as he put Teresa's body somewhere it would never be found, he'd probably just get away with it. He knew if he could set up a different campsite and the police would never be able to locate the actual place that the murder happened, so they couldn't find this rock with the sacrificial markings or any blood or anything like that. He knew that if he was able to convince them the campsite was at a different place, they'd find nothing. He knew that if he burned his clothes or got rid of his clothes, and, put on different clothes, there wouldn't be any evidence of Teresa's murder on his hands, on his clothes, anything like that. He knew that if he stayed out there in the mountains long enough, there'd be a high likelihood that Teresa's body would succumb to the elements, whether it be nature or animals. He knew what he was doing. It feels like he knew what he was doing. And he also knew enough to know that if Teresa's body was never found, he would probably get away with it because That's what happened. He was right. Now, I think we all would agree that Skip was not mentally healthy. And some people do say this. They're like, well, Skip was just not mentally healthy, but it doesn't make him bad. And maybe Teresa did wander off and get lost, or maybe he did kill her, but he did it because it was in a moment of psychosis. It just all seemed to be wrapped up too neatly and perfectly for Skip Welch to not have done a dozen things to make sure that he had not left behind any loose ends. Except for like his kids who saw him with Teresa, but he probably didn't think his own kids were going to turn him in. I don't know what he thought, but he would have an explanation for that anyways. And that leads me to wonder, listen, this is crazy. Let me know if you think I'm being too crazy. Skip was seen by his kids. He let Teresa tell them that they were going into the mountains to see Bigfoot and that she was excited. And he really didn't try to run from the police. He really was pretty forthright when he started talking about Bigfoot and the cave people and all of that. I wonder if, because he wasn't being believed about Bigfoot, because he had tried Roger Lejeunesse, the anthropologist, because he had tried to tell everybody and convince everybody that Bigfoot was real, and he brought people up in there and they claimed they saw things while they were on some sort of acid trip. He wanted people to believe it. And remember, James Welch said in his June 20th interview with Detective Stokes, he knew that it would get publicity. Publicity for what? Publicity for Bigfoot, of course. What else matters that much? What else matters more than convincing everybody that Bigfoot's real? And what would convince people that Bigfoot is real? Well, you bring a 16-year-old girl that no one's going to miss into the mountains, and then you come back without her, and then when people ask you where she is, you say, damn, I got a story to tell you. Bigfoot and the cave people, they've got her. Now do you believe me? How could you not believe me now? And that's why he acted the way he did in the days and weeks following, going to Dorothy's house and crying about the Satanists, and they took her and made her all white, and then going home and saying there was demons and screaming and telling the story about a demon devil man in his car. Maybe that's why he did that. Maybe he really genuinely believes in Bigfoot and genuinely believes he's seen Bigfoot, and he had to do something crazy. He had to do something crazy and drastic and extreme to convince the rest of the world. And I mean, for a select few idiots on the internet, it worked. But for the majority of us, it didn't, because it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I'm not saying Bigfoot doesn't exist, okay? I'm not. I would never say that. I would never say that because I don't know. What I'm saying is I don't think anybody's actually ever seen Bigfoot. And what I'm also saying is if Bigfoot did exist, Bigfoot is not acting as the personal executive assistant to some race of cave people. Bigfoot does his own thing, all right? He does his own thing. He's a loner. Here I go again on my own, down the only road I've ever known. That's Bigfoot. He rolls alone. He don't roll deep unless he's rolling deep with his own kind. He and his Bigfoot people are not going to be like the protectors and the army of these cave people. And if Bigfoot is running around in the woods, he is certainly not just snatching little 16-year-old girls. I guarantee you that any Bigfoot out there is kinder, more gentle, and less of a violent asshole than Skip Welch or Blind Johnny was. Okay? That's all I'm going to say. So if I'm going to go in the woods and I'm faced with a Bigfoot or somebody like Skip Welch or, Blind Johnny, Uncle John, I'm going to be like, Bigfoot, it's me and you, bro. Let's go. Let's roll out. I like your bike. I like your beard. Let's get out of here. I'm taking my chances with the monster over these monsters, or these devils, I should say, because devils do live in Ghost Canyon, and his name is Skip Welch. But anyways, yeah, I was wondering that, did Skip do this to make people believe in Bigfoot? What? That would be crazy. Now, Skip Welch did pass away about 10 years after Teresa Bier went missing. And sadly, I believe that the answers about what happened to Teresa and where she is died with him. But if you know anything about this, I know it's an old case, but it's allegedly still an open case. Not active, but open. But if you know anything about this, please let me know. And I'm going to actually see if there's still a number you can call. I mean, it's been so long. I don't even know if they're actually taking tips, but if there is one, I'm going to put one in the description box. But if not, and if you know something cool, let me know. And then I'll blow up the Fresno Police Department like they've never seen before. Oh no, I can't say blow up the Fresno Police. I don't mean blow it up like explosion. I mean like call them a lot. I'm so sorry. That's going to be cropped out of context. Anyways, before we sign off for today, let's have Stephanie's Small Business Showcase. Woo-woo! Today, we have a small business that comes to us from Sutter Stemple. Sutter Stemple is from Northern California, where our case takes place today. I mean, in California. And Sutter has an Etsy shop where she sells handmade jewelry. First things first, this jewelry is very pretty and unique stuff. I love the gold California pendant necklace. I love the use of all the different gems. I'm obsessed with all the bracelets. There's also this pair of Peruvian opal gold hoops that look amazing. So pretty. There's a lot of use of moonstone, which I love moonstone. I know like people make fun of me for loving moonstone, but I really like moonstone. I have so much of it. I'll show you a picture once of how much moonstone I have. But it's all very appealing to me, very pretty, very unique. And Sutter has also said that she's lived on and off Maui for about 5 years. She's got a lot of family members and personal friends there who've been affected by the wildfires. So she is going to donate 10% of the profits to people in Maui who are going through a rough time right now. And since it's the holiday season, I think that's really it's needed all year round, but I think people who are struggling during the holiday season probably are very appreciative for any help that they can get. So I think that Sutter's Small Business and Big Heart are a perfect showcase for right now. I've linked her Etsy shop in the description box, so go check out Sutter Jewelry. Give her some love, some words of encouragement, and maybe pick up a few things while you're there. But that's all I have for you today. Hit like if you liked the video. Share it if you think it's worth sharing. Subscribe if you haven't already. Why are you not subscribing? If you haven't subscribed already, I would really like you to subscribe. And let me know what you think about this in the comment section. I'm very much looking forward to any kind of conversations and discourse we can have about this case. Like, do you think Skip Welch? Do you think there's any chance Skip Welch did not do this? Let me know. But until next time, stay kind, stay beautiful, and stay safe. And I will see you very, very soon. Bye.
Battle's going straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name, better say a Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's killing you slowly. It's all you got to let it go. I got blood.